The pillow pressed harder. My lungs burned for air. My best friend stood by the door, but the keys in her spilled purse didn't belong to her. I swung the glass shard blindly, and warm blood splattered my wrist. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and fear. Someone wanted me dead, and the person I trusted most might be holding the weapon. The traction cables bit into my legs as I twisted away. The orderly's mask was still there, crumpled on the floor. But the real danger wasn't him. It was the way Jennifer's smile didn't reach her eyes. The keys glinted under the fluorescent light. My SUV, my accident, my life hanging by a thread. The antiseptic scent of bleach and ozone stung Sarah's nostrils, sharp enough to cut through the fog clouding her mind. Above, the ceiling tiles blurred into a grid of weeping water stains. She tried to shift, but her legs remained anchored in heavy steel traction, two weights pinning her to the thin mattress. Every breath whistled against the silence of the room. Sarah's eyes tracked the ceiling, her mind instinctively performing the only ritual that kept the panic at bay. 1 tile, 2 tiles, 3. She followed the hairline fracture in the plaster, a structural warning sign, as it snaked toward the ventilation grate. The joists above were likely pine, a substandard retrofit from the 70s. She could feel the weight of the building pressing down on her, a massive, unyielding slab of concrete and glass that felt less like a hospital and more like a tomb. Jennifer leaned over the railing, her face a mask of practiced porcelain concern. She smoothed the hair away from Sarah's forehead with fingers that felt like ice. The smell of Jennifer's perfume, a cloying, artificial lily, competed with the chemical tang of the ward. "Is the light too bright, honey?" Jennifer's voice dripped with a sweetness that made Sarah's throat tighten. "I told the nurse you need the blinds drawn. You always did prefer the dark when you had these episodes." Sarah searched for a name, a memory, a single spark of recognition to match the woman's manicured grip. Nothing surfaced except a cold, hollow knot tightening in her stomach. Her pulse hammered against the thin skin of her wrist, a rapid-fire staccato that felt like a bridge nearing its load-bearing limit. Jennifer's presence was suffocating, an overbearing weight that didn't belong in the architecture of Sarah's life. Even through the haze of the painkillers, a primal instinct screamed that this woman, with her perfect hair and predatory eyes, was a structural flaw in the room. "I don't..." Sarah's voice cracked, dry as parchment. "Who are you?" Jennifer's smile didn't falter, though her grip on the bedrail whitened her knuckles. "Don't strain yourself. I'm the only one who stayed. Everyone else moved on while you were under." The door clicked open, cutting through the stifling tension. A man stood in the threshold, clutching a bouquet of crushed carnations. His tie hung crooked, a sign of a man losing his grip on order, and his eyes searched Sarah's with a desperate, frantic hope. This was Mark. Sarah didn't remember his favorite color or the sound of his laugh, but she recognized the cadence of his grief. "Sarah?" Mark's voice trembled. "Thank God. They said you were awake." Jennifer didn't turn around. She simply tightened her hold on Sarah's hand, her thumb digging into the bruise left by the IV drip. The air in the room grew thick, the oxygen seemingly sucked out by the unspoken history between the two people standing over her. Sarah watched them, her architect's brain noting the way Mark mirrored Jennifer's posture, leaning in as if pulled by an invisible gravity. He looked at Jennifer for permission before he even crossed the threshold. "The doctor said she's still very confused, Mark," Jennifer said, her voice a soft warning. "She doesn't even know who I am. You should stay back. The stress might trigger another lapse." Mark stopped mid-stride, his shoulders sagging. "But I brought these. You know? I thought they might help her remember the garden." "Later, Mark." Jennifer commanded. Sarah watched the exchange, her mind calculating the distance to the door. 42 feet. 6 seconds at a dead run, if her legs weren't shattered and pinned by steel. She felt like a bird trapped in a collapsing chimney. There was a hidden history here, a secret alliance that tasted like copper in the back of her mouth. Mark's constant need for validation, that pleading, "You know," at the end of every sentence, acted as a tether, allowing Jennifer to lead him exactly where she wanted. The afternoon light began to fade, casting long, skeletal shadows across the linoleum. Mark stayed in the corner, a ghost of a man, while Jennifer moved about the room with the efficiency of a warden. She adjusted the IV drip, her movements jerky and precise. Every time she passed the sink, Sarah heard the faint, rhythmic humming of "Happy Birthday." It was a low, haunting sound that vibrated through the metal bed frame. Jennifer scrubbed her hands until the skin was an angry, raw red, the scent of harsh soap filling the small space. Suddenly, the heavy door pushed open again. This wasn't a doctor or nurse. A man in a blue orderly's uniform entered, his face obscured by a surgical mask. He didn't look at Sarah. He looked at the ceiling, his lips moving in a silent count. 1, 2, 3. "Time for the evening change," the man muttered, his voice muffled by the mask. He cracked his knuckles, thumb to pinky, a sequence of sharp pops that sounded like dry wood snapping. Jennifer stepped back, while giving him room. "I'll go get us some coffee, Mark. Sarah needs her rest." The orderly moved toward the bed. He didn't reach for the IV bag. Instead, his large, calloused hands reached for the extra pillow at the foot of the bed. Sarah's internal alarm, the one that sensed a shifting foundation before the first crack appeared, went into a frenzy. The man leaned over her, his bulk blocking the flickering fluorescent light. "Just a moment of sleep," he whispered. The pillow descended. The world turned white and muffled. Sarah's lungs burned as the fabric was pressed into her face, cutting off the oxygen. She couldn't move her legs, but her arms were free. She reached out, her fingers grazing the nightstand, searching for a weapon, a tool, anything to stop the collapse. Her hand closed around the heavy glass water pitcher. With a surge of adrenaline that defied her injuries, she swung it upward. The glass shattered against the man's temple with a sickening, crystalline crunch. Shards flew like shrapnel, glinting in the dim light. The orderly let out a muffled grunt and stumbled back, clutching his head. Blood began to seep through his mask, a dark stain spreading across the blue fabric. He didn't stay to finish the job. He turned and fled, his heavy boots thudding against the linoleum as he vanished into the hallway. Sarah lay gasping, her chest heaving as she pulled in the scorched, dusty air. The room was silent again, save for the rhythmic dripping of water from the broken pitcher onto the floor. She looked down at her hand. Amidst the chaos, she had palmed a large, jagged shard of glass. It bit into her palm, a sharp, grounding pain that felt more real than anything else in this nightmare. Jennifer rushed back into the room, her eyes wide, though Sarah noticed she didn't look at the door where the attacker had fled. She looked at Sarah. "Oh my God, Sarah, what happened?" Jennifer cried, dropping to her knees to begin cleaning up the mess. As Jennifer bent over, her designer purse tipped onto its side. The contents spilled across the floor, a lipstick, a compact, and a heavy set of keys attached to a leather fob. Sarah's breath hitched. She recognized that fob. It was a miniature structural level, a gift she'd bought herself when she landed the waterfront project. Those were the keys to her silver SUV. The car, the police said, was in a high-security impound lot, mangled beyond recognition. Jennifer's hands trembled as she shoved the items back into her bag. But she wasn't fast enough. The reflection in the shard of glass in Sarah's hand confirmed it. The keys were right there. Jennifer had them. The woman who claimed to be her savior was carrying the keys to the vehicle that had nearly ended Sarah's life. Just an accident, Jennifer whispered, her eyes darting to the hallway. The orderly must have tripped. He was so clumsy, wasn't he? Sarah didn't answer. She tucked the glass shard under her hip, hiding it beneath a thin hospital sheet. The foundation of her world hadn't just cracked. It had vanished. She was standing on air, and the only thing keeping her from falling was the cold, sharp edge of the glass in her hand. The next morning, the gray Seattle sky seemed to press even lower against the hospital windows. Jennifer returned early, carrying a stack of folders and a portable espresso. She looked refreshed, her nails freshly painted a deep, predatory red. She sat in the chair by the bed and opened the top folder, her expression turning into one of feigned sympathy. "I have some news, Sarah. I spoke with the partners at the firm this morning," Jennifer said, tapping a pen against her chin. "They've made a decision. Given the cognitive deficits the doctors are reporting, they've officially removed you from the waterfront project." Sarah felt a cold spike of adrenaline. "That's my design, Jennifer. I spent 3 years on those load-bearing calculations. The seismic dampers alone took 6 months." "I know, honey. That's why I offered to step in," Jennifer said, a thin smile touching her lips. "I'm the lead architect now. I'm going to make sure your vision stays intact, even if you aren't there to see it. It's better this way. You need to focus on your recovery." The board agreed that a permanent cognitive decline makes you a liability for the site inspections. Liability. The word hit Sarah like a falling beam. Jennifer wasn't just taking her keys. She was stripping the very structure of Sarah's identity. She was erasing Sarah from her own life, brick by brick. "I need to call my boss," Sarah said, her hand reaching for the bedside table where her phone should have been. "Oh, the doctors took it," Jennifer lied smoothly. "They said the blue light was interfering with your neurological healing. But look, your co-workers sent cards." Jennifer dropped a stack of colorful envelopes onto the bed. Sarah picked one up. "Get well soon, Sarah. We miss you. Dave." She opened another. "Thinking of you. Elena." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She was a woman who noticed the minute details, the way a screw was turned, the thickness of a line on a blueprint. The D in Dave and the E in Elena were identical. The loops of the Y, the slant of the T, every single card had been written by the same hand. Jennifer's hand. The isolation was now a physical presence in the room, a thick, invisible wall. The television, which had been playing local news the day before, was now locked on a channel of static and white noise. The window to the world screen across from her bed showed a park where the birds flew backward every 10 minutes as the video looped. Subverted beat 1.7. Smart decision. Mark arrived an hour later, looking even more disheveled. His eyes were bloodshot, and he kept twisting his wedding ring finger. Sarah knew she had to act. She had the evidence. She had seen the keys. If she could just get Mark to look in Jennifer's purse, the facade would crumble. Mark loved her. He was her fiancé. He was the one person who could break this siege. "Mark," Sarah whispered, pulling him close when Jennifer went to talk to a nurse in the hall. "Listen to me. Jennifer has my keys, the SUV keys. I saw them in her purse. She's lying to you about the car. You have to look. Please." She spoke with the clarity of a structural report. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She gave him the facts. She explained that the cards were faked, that the orderly had attacked her. She was being smart, rational, and precise. False positive. Mark took her hand. His eyes cleared for a moment, and he nodded. The keys? In her bag? Sarah, if that's true, I'll check, I promise. I'll find out what's going on, you know? I'll talk to the police again. Just stay calm. I'm here now. Sarah felt a wave of relief so powerful, it made her lightheaded. The weight on her chest eased. She had reached him. Mark was going to be her eyes and ears outside these walls. He squeezed her hand, and for the first time since she woke up, the ceiling didn't feel like it was falling. The crack, but as Mark turned to leave, he stopped by the door where Jennifer was waiting. Jennifer didn't look angry. She looked pitying. She reached out and touched Mark's arm, leaning in close. She whispered something Sarah couldn't hear, and then she handed him a thick manila envelope. Mark opened it and began to scan the pages. His face went pale, and his grip on the papers tightened until they crinkled. Full collapse. Mark turned back to Sarah, but the hope in his eyes had been replaced by a devastating, hollow sadness. Sarah, Jennifer showed me the neurological reports, Mark said, his voice cracking. The doctors, they say the trauma caused confabulatory psychosis. You're inventing memories to fill the gaps, you know? The keys, the attack. It's all part of the delusion. No, Mark, I saw them, Sarah shouted, her voice echoing in the sterile room. She even showed me the police report for the SUV. Mark continued, ignoring her. The car was crushed at the scrapyard 3 days ago. There are no keys, Sarah. Jennifer has been staying at our house to keep things running. And she's the only one who had the strength to write those cards for you because everyone else is too heartbroken to see you like this. Jennifer stepped forward, tucking her arm through Mark's. It's the brain's way of protecting itself, honey. You want someone to blame for the accident, so you're picking me. I forgive you. Sarah realized with a sickening jolt that her smart move had backfired. By presenting the truth, she had played right into the narrative Jennifer had already constructed. Every piece of evidence Sarah cited was now proof of her insanity. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a psychiatric patient. Mark wasn't her ally. He was her jailer's unwitting accomplice. He looked at Jennifer with a look of pure, dependent gratitude. Thank God you're here to help us through this, Jennifer, Mark whispered. Jennifer smiled at Sarah, a sharp, triumphant baring of teeth. Of course. I'll always be here. The next few days were a blur of therapeutic isolation. Sarah was moved to a wheelchair for supervised walks, but the supervision was always Jennifer. They moved through the quiet back hallways of the hospital, far from the busy nursing stations. Jennifer pushed the chair with a steady, rhythmic gait, her humming of "Happy Birthday" echoing off the tiled walls. They stopped in a narrow corridor near the service elevators. The air was hot here, smelling of grease and stagnant water. A yellow caution tape hung loosely across an open elevator shaft, where a heavy metal door had been removed for maintenance. You know, Sarah, Jennifer said, her voice dropping to a conversational tone. The load-bearing capacity of a human skull is surprisingly low. I read that in one of your textbooks. Jennifer began to tilt the wheelchair. The front wheels lifted off the ground. Sarah looked down into the dark, yawning throat of the shaft. Cables dangled like loose nerves. It would be such a tragedy, Jennifer whispered. The poor, delusional woman, confused by her medication, wandering away from her friend and falling. Mark would be devastated, but I'd be there to comfort him. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She couldn't run. She couldn't scream. The hallway was a dead zone. She reached into the fold of her gown and gripped the glass shard. As the wheelchair tipped further, Sarah didn't try to pull back. She lunged forward, jamming the shard directly into the rubber of the right wheel and bracing her elbows against the doorframe with the calculated leverage of a master builder. The chair jerked to a halt, the frame groaning under the sudden stress. Jennifer gasped, her grip slipping as the sudden resistance threw her off balance. Help! Someone help!" Jennifer suddenly shrieked, her voice shifting instantly from a killer's whisper to a victim's cry. Nurses appeared at the end of the hall, running toward them. Jennifer was already on the floor, clutching her chest, pointing at the open shaft. "She tried to go in," Jennifer sobbed. "I tried to stop her, but she's so strong. She's trying to hurt herself." The nurses swarmed Sarah, pinning her arms, injecting something cold and heavy into her IV. Sarah watched Jennifer through the haze of the sedative. Jennifer was being held by a young orderly, the same man from the night before, his temple now covered by a neat white bandage. He caught Sarah's eye and gave a small, slow nod. The trap was closing. Sunday evening arrived with a heavy, bruised purple sunset. The hospital felt abandoned, the skeleton crew of the weekend moving like shadows in the distance. Sarah lay in her bed, her legs throbbing with a dull, rhythmic ache. She felt the vibration in the floor before she heard the footsteps. Jennifer entered the room, locking the door behind her. She wasn't wearing her friend mask anymore. She looked tired, her eyes hollowed out by a hunger that no amount of success could fill. "The paperwork is done, Sarah," Jennifer said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "I have medical power of attorney. At dawn, a private ambulance is taking you to Blackwood Heights. It's a lovely facility, very quiet. No windows, no phones, just you and the silence." Jennifer reached out and placed her hand directly over the traction pins in Sarah's legs. She began to press down. The pain was a white-hot explosion, a structural failure of her entire nervous system. Sarah's mouth opened in a silent scream, her back arching off the bed. "I was the one in the SUV, Sarah," Jennifer whispered, leaning in so close Sarah could smell the coffee on her breath. "I watched you through the windshield. You looked so surprised when I didn't brake. I'm going to take your job, your design, and your man. And you're going to sit in a dark room and rot until you forget your own name." Jennifer let go, and the pain receded into a dull, agonizing roar. She stood up and smoothed her skirt. "Don't bother with the call button. I've already diverted the line. And the security footage for this wing? A little software glitch took care of that. You're invisible now. Subverted beat 1.12. Smart decision." As Jennifer turned to leave, she paused and pulled a small, sleek device from her pocket. It was a digital voice-activated recorder. "Here," Jennifer said, tossing it onto Sarah's chest. "Mark wanted you to have this. He thinks it will help you track your memories. Record your thoughts, Sarah. It'll give the doctors at Blackwood something to laugh at." Sarah stared at the device. Her mind, even through the pain, began to calculate. Jennifer was arrogant. She was gloating. If Sarah could trigger the recorder, she could capture a confession. It was a perfect plan. Jennifer was standing right there, her guard down, believing she had already won. Sarah reached out, her fingers trembling, and slid the record switch to the on position. "Tell me again," Sarah whispered, her voice a ragged thread. "Tell me why you did it. If I'm going away, I want to know the truth. You owe me that." "False positive." Jennifer laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. She sat back down. "Why?" "Because you had everything, and you didn't even notice. You walked through that firm like you owned the air, sketching your little flaws. You were the flaw, Sarah. I just corrected the architecture. She went on for 10 minutes, detailing the embezzlement from the waterfront project, how she'd cut the brake lines on the SUV, and how she'd hired her brother, Robert, to finish the job in the hospital. The recorder's little red light glowed steadily. Sarah felt a surge of triumph. She had it. She had the evidence that would destroy Jennifer and set Mark free. The crack. Jennifer stood up to leave, but she didn't walk to the door. She stopped at the foot of the bed and looked at the recorder. She didn't look panicked. She looked amused. She reached out and took the device from Sarah's hand. "Did you get it all, honey?" Jennifer asked. Full collapse. Jennifer pressed the play button. "You were the flaw, Sarah. I just corrected the architecture. It's a good recording," Jennifer said, her voice turning cold. "But you forgot one thing about the hospital's infrastructure, Sarah. The Wi-Fi in this wing is routed through the administrative server I now control as your legal guardian." Jennifer tapped a few buttons on the device. "I'm not just recording you, Sarah. I'm editing your therapy sessions. I've been sending clips to Mark all week, clips of you screaming, clips of you threatening me, clips of you admitting you want to end it all." She held the device up. "This recording isn't your escape. It's the final piece of evidence I need to prove you're a danger to yourself and others. I'll just trim out my parts, and all Mark will hear is you talking to a ghost, confessing to crimes you didn't commit because your mind is broken." Sarah watched in horror as Jennifer deleted the file, her thumb moving with a casual, devastating precision. The very tool Sarah thought would save her had been turned into the final nail in her coffin. She was now more than a patient. She was a recorded liability. Jennifer tucked the device into her bag and adjusted her tie 3 times. "See you at dawn, Sarah." The night was an endless, suffocating wait. Sarah lay in the dark, listening to the hospital breathe. The hum of the ventilation, the distant chime of an elevator, the squeak of rubber soles on linoleum. It was a symphony of her own impending destruction. She had no phone, no allies, and her own body was a cage of broken bone and steel. But she still had her mind. She began to visualize the room, not as a place of healing, but as a system of electrical and structural points. The bed was motorized, a heavy steel frame powered by a 120-volt motor. The IV pole was stainless steel. The ventilation grate was held by a single, loose screw. She reached under her hip and pulled out the glass shard she had kept hidden. When the transport team arrived at 5 a.m., the room was silent. Jennifer was there, dressed in a sharp power suit, looking like the picture of a grieving, dedicated friend. "She's been very quiet all night," Jennifer told the paramedics. "I think she's finally accepted the transition." As they moved to unlock the wheels of the bed, Sarah acted. She didn't fight the men. She reached down and jammed the glass shard into the exposed wiring of the bed's motor housing, leaning her full weight into it. A shower of blue sparks erupted, the smell of scorched dust filling the air. The short circuit didn't just kill the bed, it sent a surge through the local circuit breaker. The lights died, and the fire alarm, a piercing, bone-shaking wail, vibrated through the floor. The hospital's safety protocol, the very rigid system David Thompson lived by, took over. The wing went into automatic lockdown. Magnetic doors slammed shut. The sprinkler system in the hallway hissed to life. In the chaos, the head of security, David Thompson, arrived, his tie perfectly straight. Mark was right behind him, looking terrified. "What is going on here?" Thompson demanded, wiping a speck of soot from his sleeve. Sarah didn't look at Jennifer. She looked at Mark. "The recorder. Sarah said, her voice cutting through the alarm. "The one Jennifer gave me. Check the deleted folder on the cloud backup, David. Your system archives everything for 48 hours before permanent erasure. It's protocol, isn't it?" Jennifer's face went from porcelain to ash. She lunged for her bag, but Thompson was faster. He was a man of rules, and Sarah had just cited the most important one in his handbook. "Hold on, Miss Miller," Thompson said, his hand closing around her wrist. "Let's just check the log, for the sake of the standard incident report." They stood in the flickering emergency lights, the sound of the alarm still hammering in their ears. Thompson pulled a tablet from his pocket and synced it to the wing's server. He scrolled, his eyes narrowing. He pulled his tie once, twice, 3 times. He turned the screen around. The recording played, not the edited version Jennifer had prepared, but the raw, unvarnished confession of the woman who had tried to play God with Sarah's life. "I was the one in the SUV, Sarah. I'm going to take your job, your design, and your man." Mark fell back against the wall, his hand over his mouth. He looked at Jennifer as if seeing a monster for the first time. Jennifer didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply stood there, her eyes turning into cold, dead glass. "The foundation was always weak, Jennifer," Sarah whispered. "You just didn't see the seams." The police arrived 10 minutes later. Sarah watched from her bed as they led Jennifer away. The woman who had hummed "Happy Birthday" while scrubbing her hands was now being scrubbed from Sarah's life. Robert, the orderly, was picked up in the lobby, his knuckles still cracking in that rhythmic, terrified sequence. Mark stayed behind. He approached the bed, his hand reaching out to touch Sarah's. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I should have known. I should have listened to you, you know." Sarah looked at him. She saw the man she had loved, but she also saw the man who had let a predator narrate his reality. She saw a man who was a structural weakness she could no longer afford. "Go home, Mark," Sarah said, her voice calm and final. "I need to focus on the load-bearing parts of my life now, and you aren't one of them." 3 weeks later, the Seattle sky was still gray, but the light felt different. Sarah sat in a wheelchair at the edge of the waterfront project. The site was a skeleton of steel and concrete, a beautiful, rising promise. She looked at the blueprints in her lap, her fingers tracing the seismic dampers she had designed. She still had the scars on her legs, and the sound of a closing door still made her heart skip a beat. But as she looked up at the rising tower, she didn't see a collapse waiting to happen. She saw a structure that had survived the storm. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her keys, the real keys, returned by the police. She ran her thumb over the miniature level fob. Sarah Johnson smiled. The foundation was solid, and for the first time in her life, she didn't need to sketch the exit routes. She was exactly where she was supposed to be.